Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Empowered Self podcast with me, your host, Krystal Long. This is where we explore resilience, transformation, and the courage it takes to live as our most authentic selves. My guest today is Christina Kenny. She is also known as the Body Soul Coach. Christina is a somatic coach and a mental health first aid trainer here in Ireland. At 17, she left Ireland feeling she couldn't be herself in the culture of the time. What followed was a journey across England, Scotland, and Spain, working as a head chef, running her own bistro, studying business, building a life with her partner, and living through both success and loss. Returning to Ireland and after the death of her brother marked the start of a new chapter, one that eventually led to her somatic therapy, a breakthrough that reconnected her to her body, her relationships, and her purpose. Christina, you're very welcome, and thank you for joining me on the Empowered Self podcast.
Thank you, Krystal. I'm delighted to be here today, and I appreciate your invitation.
Okay, so Christina, as you know, as we know, you left Ireland, as I said earlier, at 17. What led to that decision, and how did it shape your journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'll take myself back to that time as it was a few decades ago now. But I think what led to that decision at that time is there was two parts to it for me. One part was I had this kind of longing to explore the world and to get out there and explore different cultures and see the world. And I think that came from an uncle of mine who had lived many years in Brazil. And when he used to take trips home and he'd put on a slideshow and show us his trips into the Amazon and meeting tribes. And it was just so wonderful to get that insight, from Ireland, which seemed quite a small environment from my small eyes and my little community at the time. And then a cousin of mine, she left and traveled to Australia. And again, I just had this longing to explore the world. So the part of it was that I definitely had the the travel bug in me from an early age. And then the other part really was the piece around not feeling like I wasn't fitting in. So I was brought up in Ireland and I was a teenager in the 80s. And at that time in Ireland, the Catholic Church was quite dominant and very much there was this kind of conditioning around, you met a guy, you got married and you had kids and I didn't see myself fitting into that box. And partly because of my own sexuality and my own kind of like wonder about that. I was more attracted to women, girls at that stage, and that wasn't. I didn't really have role models to look up to it and to see how I explore that piece of me. So I felt like there was a part of me that didn't fit in. So from that and the bug to travel, between the two of those things, I kind of left and got the opportunity to leave at 17, 18 years of age. At that time in the UK, we were lucky enough that they were offering grants. So they were paying for your fees, etc., to students from overseas. So that gave me an in. So I was able to travel over to England and really didn't come back to live here till many, many years later. So that was the start of my journey.
And a part of that journey took you on to work as a head chef, and you ran your own bistro. And what did those years teach you about resilience for yourself?
Yeah, so from studying down in England, I moved up to Edinburgh. And in Edinburgh, I started out working in kitchens and washing dishes. And basically, I kind of fell into it. However, I did have a massive passion around food, two influences there. One was my grandmother. She was a massive influence. I remember her sitting me on the stool in her kitchen and it was like watching a TV show as she was cooking and telling me all about the different ingredients she was using, and etc. And then watching programs, I remember watching Floyd, and he used to travel to, places like Thailand and cooking on a wok on a boat. And it was my love for travel and love for food were being hit there. So it wasn't a far stretch that ended up in kitchens. And during that journey of becoming a chef, moving up the ladder, I learned on the job. So we did a lot of on the job training. And in those kitchen environments, there's a lot of pressure. And what I learned on that journey is like it was very, very challenging, very tough. But it was that discipline and rigor, that day to day of showing up every day and working in a team and figuring out how we can work and flow together. And that was huge, because when you hit that flow state in a team, it's it's quite intoxicating. But that takes time. It takes having those hard conversations with people. Maybe someone's having a hard conversation with you and allowing that to land. And there was times when I nearly walked out, a few times because it's quite intense. And when you're young and you're getting that kind of constant feedback, it can be tough. But I had really good mentors along the way, other chefs that were a bit further along the journey who helped support me to keep me going. And that gave me the kind of the graw, as we say here, to kind of really go up the ladder, get up to that top level. And so between the mentors and the showing up every day, and the passion for food kept me going. And yeah, so I think what really shaped me is that rigor, that discipline, that practicing every day a skill. And that kind of was something that I could transfer into other parts of my life since then as well.
And for how many years were you working in the kitchens or in the chefing and the bistro?
Yeah, so I started out probably a late for someone. I would have been my early 20s. And I continued on till I think my 40s, basically. Around 40, I think it was. So what happened was I moved up the ladder through the ranks. I worked in a few different kitchens. And from there, I got to work sort of setting up a business for somebody else. And that kind of gave me the incentive to do it for myself. So the opportunity came to start my own bistro. And that brought a whole other set of challenges because it wasn't just about cooking at that point or running a kitchen. It was about running a whole business. And what I learned from that was that, there was a certain amount, even though it was very challenging in the kitchen, you were behind the scenes. You weren't really dealing with the customer. Um, and so that gave you a bit of protection, I suppose. So when I had to start dealing with the customer or potential customers, that brought on a whole new set of challenges for me, that visibility piece of putting myself out there. And within that learning, I remember at one point, I was really struggling I really wanted to reach out to people. I was trying to make the business work during the day. And so I wanted to reach out to offices and maybe offer catering during the day. And that whole, the thoughts of phoning up people and asking them about business, really, I found a massive barrier. And a friend of mine recommended this friend of hers who was a therapist at the time. And so I went to him and I said, listen, I'm having this block in relation to this. And he said, okay, let's try some CBT. So we worked through the problem. And at the time, it actually did work for that particular scenario because I was able to then remove it as part of me because it felt very much close to me when I was phoning up people. But then it became more, okay, I'm just going through a list of offices. I'm just calling them. If I get a rejection, that's okay. It's not going to impact me. So it gave me the ability to be able to do things like that, which was helpful at the time. And then you're learning that whole set of, you know, the business side. You've got overheads, you've got to rent to pay, you have food to pay for, you have electricity bills, rates to pay, and then you have staff as well. And it's like how you interact with your staff and how you bring them on and how you can kind of encourage them and keep them as well. So there was a lot more involved, a lot more complexity than just being in the kitchen. So it definitely was a next level. And in moments, there was a lot of joy, a lot of joy when people are in your restaurant and they're bringing their families for celebrations and events, and they're returning, and then there was opportunities to go and work for during the festival in different locations because people enjoyed my food and liked what I did. So even throughout those challenges, there was good times and bad times, like life in general.
And with those challenges, there came a time where you had to return to Ireland after your brother's passing. And how did that loss influence your path going forward?
Yeah, so basically what happened was I decided there was a time when I was selling the restaurant, and it was kind of that last year I could sense that there was a turn. Things weren't going as well. And so I made the decision to call it quits. And from there I actually went to Barcelona for 3 years. And in that time I was kind of teaching English, enjoying myself and my partner Sarah moved there. And yeah, towards the end of that, I got the call. Unfortunately, my brother passed away suddenly. And that was a huge tragedy, a huge loss for us as a family. And myself and Sarah had that discussion around, we were already thinking about we were looking for a change. And we decided that why not come back to Ireland to be there for my family and also gave us the opportunity to retrain and do something different for ourselves and be more settled. But yeah, that loss for my brother has really what it's done for me. We all grief impacts us all differently. And for me, the big learning was that he hasn't got the opportunity to live his life now, but I do. And to honor him, it's like, I need to live every day, whatever that looks like. I show up and I live, and it's not always rosy, but it's I get that opportunity to do that. So that was my big takeaway from that loss. And it's something that we all have to deal with through life, and we will all take something different.
And as you said earlier, you tried many therapies before discovering somatic work. What made somatic therapy different for you, and how did you come across it?
Yeah, so just to clarify, somatic coaching and no problem. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, when I came back to Ireland, as you can imagine, it was decades that I hadn't lived here. So Ireland has changed in that time, but also I've changed in that time. And when I came back, it was like my young teenage self reared her head, and I realized that maybe there are things that I ran away from that I now had to face, as an adult. And so that started my journey of, I didn't know what it was, but I knew something had to shift. And there were a lot of great qualities that really stood with me through the time I was away. For example, being fiercely independent and fiercely determined and all of those things, which were great to get me to where I was. However, what it was blocking in a way was my connection to myself and to others, that more deeper level of connection. Because when I was away, I would not really look for support. I would feel like I could do it myself and all of that. And so when I came home, I realized that, you know, I was struggling to kind of get in touch with my own feelings. And I was like, how do I feel? I'd ask myself that question and I really couldn't connect to that. So this curiosity led me to kind of trying different things. Like you said there, I tried therapy, traditional therapy. I tried plant medicine ceremonies. I started my coaching journey. I did my first coaching course. And all of these things gave me something. I definitely took something from all of these various things, but nothing was really integrating or changing or on my day to day. I was learning pieces, but nothing that I could actually apply on a day to day to really kind of change or show up differently until I discovered the somatic coaching. And how that happened was basically while I was doing my coaching course, I realized that, or one of my facilitators mentioned somatics, and I asked more. I got curious about this, and he was saying it's all about like going into the body, uh, getting in touch with the intelligence within ourselves, and something about it intuitively was like, okay, I'm drawn to this. And when I looked around in Ireland, there was no one really doing this here, that I couldn't find. So I reached out to a woman in London, and she suggested a few different places that were doing somatic coaching, a couple in Europe and one in the States. And the one in the States, which was the one over in California that I was drawn to the most because they've been doing it a long time, and also they do a lot in person. And I think for me it was like, well, initially I think in person's probably a good way to start. So it turned out that they were doing a 4-day course in Barcelona. So I was like, brilliant, I'll go over and do that because going to the States was going to be a bit financially not available to me at the time. And anyway, I went over, and on day 2 of this course, there was like about 24 of us there coming from all walks of life. I had this moment in day 2. It was when someone else was sharing their story, and something in their story just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I just felt this emotion well up inside of me. And so I took myself outside, and someone came out, and I could feel the emotion coming up inside of me. And there was a huge release within that. And one of the facilitators did some somatic coaching with me. And during this session, I felt like my whole body just collapsed. It was almost like everything I was holding on to for all those years felt the permission to collapse, to allow it to release. And when that release happened, it was like I felt so much lighter. And the one thing that stuck to me after that was I remember talking to people afterwards, people I know, and I was able to keep eye contact with people. And I was able to sit with people and talk to them eye to eye. And that might sound strange, but beforehand, I wouldn't have been able to say whether I could make eye contact or not. But I knew in those moments that this is new. This is new for me to be able to sit here feeling calm and have eye contact with this other person. And what had changed for me was that, yeah, I felt much more connected to myself. I felt much more um, able to identify my mood, how I'm feeling. I felt more connected with other people, to be able to sit with other people, not felt that discomfort. And what has changed for me is that I'm able to really feel into what is it that I want? What is it that matters to me? And then start to focus on that or work towards that. Whereas before, I'd say part of me, even though there was part of me that was going towards things that I was passionate about, but part of me was probably going along with things, going along for the ride and not really going, is this what I want? So that was my journey in getting to somatic coaching. And from there, I was like, right, well, I'm already a coach. How can I become a somatic coach? And luckily for me, the Throzy Institute actually came and did the first training in Europe. So it became more financially accessible for me to train here in Europe. And yeah, and that was my journey to finding somatic coaching as a hugely helpful tool for me but also something that I can now offer for others as well. So yeah, that was part of my journey.
And Christina, just curious, how long have you been a somatic coach, and what simple practices can people try to feel a
Mm.
bit more grounded and present in their own bodies?
Yeah, so I've been a somatic coach for a couple of years. It's been a journey to become certified, because it's quite rigorous. Very much like part of our work is that you're learning the skills to become a somatic coach, but you're also doing your own work as well because we we have to have integrity and to be holding space for people who so that if they are going deeper, that we're there to hold that for them, to hold that container for them. And I suppose that I'm trying to think of something that people could really start with. And I want to keep it really simple. So I like to sometimes give this example. So I was driving, this is an example of somatic awareness. So I was driving to deliver mental health first aid training a few weeks ago, and I was on the M50 and a car came along and it cut up in front of me. And I could feel, the frustration rise within me. Within that moment, I kind of went, okay, what do I notice? And then I noticed that my grip on the steering wheel was a lot tighter. I noticed that I was holding my breath. I noticed that I was clenching my jaw and that there was tension around my eyes. And I knew that because, I started to narrow my eyes. And so with that, I started to go, okay, let's release some of that. So I let go of the steering wheel, not completely, but the tension. I started to take more deeper breaths into the belly. And I started to soften around the jaw, sort of let my jaw hang open a little bit, soften around the eyes. And with that, that frustration just dissipated, in that moment. So what did that mean? Well, it meant that I wasn't going to carry that into training. So I was going into a room. I was able to go in without that. If I didn't have access to that, which many times before I haven't had access to that, I'd be carrying that into that room. I'd be going into that room. I'd be getting frustrated about something else. I'd be taking that frustration out on someone else, or it would be obvious to the people who were there in the room that that frustration, that tension was there. They could see it within me. They could feel that energy. So that is a simple practice that maybe, today you could start to catch yourself on all of those moments that you might be grabbed, that you might be triggered, that something might frustrate you. And just noticing how it is you're holding that in your body, what's happening with your breath, and seeing if you can release it a little bit and noticing how that might shift or change. So that's a simple practice that we could maybe try today.
Thanks, Christina. And, from my own experience as well, sometimes we forget how much we hold in our bodies.
Mm,
You know,
yeah,
we tend to talk about problems, not everybody, but some people do tend to talk about their problems a lot, but they forget that they're holding so much in their body in terms of emotions and feelings and the everyday aches and pains. It all needs to be released at some point.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And if we've been holding it for a long, long time, like my more extreme example that I gave, um, it can almost feel like you're going to die if you release that, because you've been holding so long. And this is why working with someone who's like a somatic coach or can be really helpful because it has to be done under the right circumstances with the right support, with someone that knows what they're doing. But on the smaller elements, if we can be working on this on a daily basis and just releasing these in the moment in a safe, healthy way, rather than going around taking it out on others or storing it in the body, it can be massively powerful. So there's two sides to this.
Christina, if people were to get in contact with you about your services, how would they find you or how would they
Yes.
connect?
So my I'm the Body Soul Coach. So I have a website, thebodysoulcoach.com. I'm also quite active on LinkedIn, again, the Body Soul Coach, and sometimes on Instagram. Not as frequent on Instagram, but the Body Soul Coach there as well. But please, yeah, if you're anybody's interested, I also try to do some workshops, which I'll hopefully have some upcoming in the next 2 months up in and around Dublin, because workshops can be a great way to experience what this is all about, and especially in a group environment. It's a nice little accessible way. If you're not in Dublin, we can also work online with one-to-ones. But yeah, reach out if you're curious to know more. I'd love to hear from you.
And finally, Christina, what does living as your empowered self mean to you today?
Yeah, this is a great one as well, Krystal. Um, yeah, and it really got me to reflect on this. What is my empowered self? What is that? What does that mean to me? And I feel for me it means that I have that this connection to myself, to how I'm feeling, whatever that is, whatever's showing up, to be able to have the capacity to process what's going on, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's important for me to have that agency, and while I'm doing that, why is this important to me? Is that it creates better relationships with people that I love, better relationships with my clients. And that is my main objective now in life, is that to have those great relationships and to keep working with them. Because before I didn't have that, and that's what I didn't have. And that's what was missing for me. So my empowered self now is that I have a better relationship with myself, better relationship with the people around me, and also a better relationship with the environment around me as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christina. And it's lovely to hear that your empowered self is all about better relationships with yourself and those around you and the environment. So that's a lovely little add on as well. So, Christina, thank you so much for sharing your story so openly and for showing us what's possible when we reconnect with ourselves. For those listening, you can find more about Christina's work as the Body Soul Coach through the links in the show notes later. And if this conversation resonated with you, I'd love your support in 3 ways. You can subscribe to the Empowered Self podcast so you never miss an episode. You can leave a review. It only takes a minute and makes a huge difference in helping others discover the podcast. And finally, you can share this episode with a friend who might need to hear Christina's story today. You've been listening to the Empowered Self podcast. I'm Krystal Long, and until next time, keep coming home to yourself.